Elon Musk sat quietly in his office, a rare moment of stillness amidst the whirlwind of innovation and ambition that defined his life. The idea had come to him during a conversation with a colleague about human behavior. What would happen if people didn't recognize him? How would they treat someone who seemed to have nothing? The thought lingered, turning into an irresistible challenge. Weeks later, on an overcast Thursday afternoon, he finalized the details. His disguise was simple yet effective. Second-hand clothing from a local thrift shop, scuffed sneakers that barely held together, and a scruffy, unkempt wig. A small makeup team completed the look, adding just enough wear to his face to erase the familiar features that graced magazine covers and news feeds. The transformation was stunning. Elon Musk, the billionaire innovator, now looked like any man who had fallen on hard times. He chose his destination carefully, the Copper Elm, an upscale restaurant in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Known for its exclusivity and elegant clientele, it was the perfect testing ground. This wasn't about shaming anyone, but understanding human nature. Would people look beyond the surface, or would they let appearances dictate their actions? Before leaving, he took a final glance in the mirror. The reflection staring back at him was unfamiliar, almost haunting. For the first time in years, he felt invisible, stripped of the identity that had defined him. With a deep breath, he stepped out the door, his heart beating faster than he expected. The ride to the restaurant was uneventful, the city bustling with life as usual. But for Elon, every moment felt charged with anticipation. As he approached the grand double doors of the Copper Elm, he hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, pushing them open, he stepped inside, his experiment officially underway. The Copper Elm exuded sophistication. The chandeliers cast a warm glow over meticulously arranged tables, and the murmur of conversation mixed with the occasional clinking of glasses. Elon's entrance caused a subtle ripple. Patrons glanced up briefly before resuming their meals, but the staff lingered, their eyes darting toward him. He stepped cautiously onto the polished hardwood floor, aware of every scuff his worn-out shoes made. A hostess, impeccably dressed in black, approached him hesitantly. Her professional smile wavered as she took in his appearance. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice polite but strained. "Yes," Elon replied, his tone steady but soft. "I'd like a table for one." The hostess glanced toward the bar, where a manager stood watching the interaction closely. Her smile faltered further. "We're fully booked tonight," she said quickly, her eyes flicking to a row of empty tables. Elon caught the glance but said nothing. Instead, he waited, letting the silence grow uncomfortable. From across the room, a young server named Sophia noticed the exchange. She had only been working at the Copper Elm for a few months, saving up for culinary school. Something about the man's demeanor struck her. Not pity, but curiosity. She could tell he wasn't just another wanderer looking for shelter. "I can seat him," Sophia called out, stepping forward before the hostess could dismiss him entirely. The room went quiet for a moment. All eyes were on her, including the managers, who frowned but said nothing. Elon offered Sophia a faint smile as she led him to a small table near the kitchen doors. It wasn't the prime spot, but it was a seat, and he was grateful. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. Sophia nodded, placing a menu in front of him. "Take your time," she said warmly, ignoring the whispers that started up around her. Elon observed the room carefully as he flipped through the menu. The glances from other diners ranged from curious to disdainful. He overheard snippets of conversation, speculation about who he was and why he was there. The staff, too, seemed uneasy. One server whispered loudly to another, "What's he even doing here?" Another added, "This is going to scare off the regulars." Elon noted their reactions silently, each one adding to the picture he was piecing together. As Sophia returned to take his order, Elon decided on something simple: soup and bread. "That's all?" she asked, her tone kind but surprised. "That's all," Elon replied. Sophia didn't question him further. She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Elon alone with his thoughts and the judgmental stares of the room. He could feel the weight of their gazes, but it didn't faze him. If anything, it confirmed why he was there. People often talked about kindness and empathy, but how often did they practice it when it truly mattered? The stage was set, and Elon's experiment was only beginning. As Elon waited for his meal, the tension in the room grew palpable. Diners whispered behind napkins, some glancing at him with barely concealed disdain. A man at a nearby table leaned toward his companion, muttering, "What's management thinking? Letting someone like that in here?" Elon didn't react, keeping his focus on the room. He noticed the small details, the way the hostess avoided looking in his direction, the bartender chuckling quietly with a server, and even the manager's occasional glances of disapproval. Every reaction painted a vivid picture of how appearances dictated perceptions. Sophia returned with a tray, carefully setting down a steaming bowl of tomato bisque and a small basket of bread. She placed the dishes in front of him with the same care she would for any other customer. "Enjoy your meal," she said, her smile genuine. "Thank you," Elon said, meeting her gaze. He could sense that Sophia wasn't just doing her job. She was acting out of kindness. As he ate, he noticed Sophia moving between tables, her pace quick but her demeanor calm. She worked tirelessly, ensuring every customer felt attended to. Elon watched as she handled even the most demanding patrons with grace, her patience unshaken despite the occasional condescending remark. At one point, an older woman called Sophia over, clearly agitated. "Why are you wasting time on him?" she asked, gesturing subtly toward Elon. "People like that shouldn't even be allowed in here." Sophia's cheeks flushed, but she maintained her composure. "I believe everyone deserves respect, ma'am," she replied firmly. The woman huffed, turning back to her meal without another word. Elon couldn't help but admire Sophia's courage. It wasn't easy to stand up for someone society deemed unworthy, especially in a place like this. As he finished his soup, a different server approached his table, a man in his late 20s with a stiff demeanor. "Are you planning to order anything else?" he asked, his tone bordering on rude. "No, thank you," Elon replied calmly. The server gave him a tight-lipped smile before walking away, muttering something under his breath. Elon caught the words, "waste of space," and noted them mentally. Across the room, a young couple exchanged nervous glances. The woman whispered, "What if he tries to ask us for money?" Her partner shrugged, but his expression mirrored her discomfort. Through it all, Elon remained composed, his mind racing with thoughts. This wasn't just about how he was treated, it was about the assumptions people made without knowing a thing about him. As Sophia cleared his table, she paused for a moment. "Is everything okay?" she asked softly. Elon looked up, surprised by her question. "Yes, thank you for your kindness," he said. Her expression softened and she gave him a small nod before moving on. In that brief moment, he saw the humanity he had hoped to find, a glimmer of empathy in a sea of judgment. The atmosphere in the restaurant remained tense, but Elon felt a sense of clarity. The experiment was revealing more than he had anticipated, and the next phase would take things to an entirely different level. The tension in the restaurant reached its peak as Elon stood from his table. His meal was finished, but his experiment was far from over. Slowly, he walked toward the center of the room, his every movement drawing the attention of staff and diners alike. Sophia, carrying a tray of empty glasses, stopped in her tracks, her eyes following him curiously. The manager, who had been observing him all evening, approached briskly, clearly ready to escort him out. "Excuse me, sir," the manager began, his voice clipped. "If you're finished, I'll have to ask you to leave. Our establishment—" Elon raised a hand, cutting him off gently but firmly. "I'll leave shortly," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "But before I go, I need to say something." The room fell silent. The diners, who had spent the evening sneering and whispering, now looked on with a mix of curiosity and irritation. Elon reached up, removing the wig that had concealed his identity. Gasps rippled through the room as he straightened, revealing the familiar face that had graced countless headlines and interviews. "Elon Musk?" someone whispered in disbelief. He let the recognition sink in before he spoke again. "Yes, it's me," he said, scanning the room. "And tonight, I came here not as the man you know, but as someone you wouldn't give a second glance to. I wanted to see how people treat those they believe to be beneath them." The room remained eerily quiet, the weight of his words settling over everyone. "I saw disdain. I heard whispers. I witnessed judgment, all because of how I appeared," he continued, his voice steady, but tinged with disappointment. "But one person in this entire room treated me with kindness and respect." His eyes found Sophia, who stood frozen, her tray still in hand. "Sophia," he said, gesturing for her to step forward. "You didn't know who I was, yet you chose to treat me like a human being. That's the kind of character that matters." Sophia's face turned bright red as she set down her tray and walked hesitantly toward him. "I was just doing my job," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. No, Elon replied, shaking his head. You went beyond that. You showed empathy when it would have been easier to look the other way. The diners looked at Sophia, their expressions ranging from guilt to admiration. Elon turned back to the room. To those of you who judged me tonight, let this be a lesson. Appearances are deceiving. The way you treat others reveals who you truly are. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope, handing it to Sophia. This is for you, he said. Sophia opened it carefully, her hands trembling. Inside was a handwritten note and a check. She read the note aloud. Sophia, thank you for your kindness. Use this to follow your dreams. Culinary school, your own restaurant, whatever you choose. The world needs more people like you. Her voice broke as she read the last words, tears streaming down her face. The check, written for $50,000, slipped from her hand as the room erupted into murmurs of shock and awe. Elon turned to the manager. And for this restaurant, consider this a reminder to create a culture of respect for everyone who walks through your doors. The manager, clearly flustered, nodded but said nothing. The room was a mix of stunned silence and quiet apologies as Elon made his way to the exit. Before leaving, he turned back to Sophia. Never lose that spark of kindness. It's rare, and it's powerful. With that, he left, the door closing softly behind him, leaving a room full of people reevaluating their actions. The restaurant remained silent long after Elon Musk walked out. Patrons who had whispered cruel comments moments earlier now shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces flushed with embarrassment. Some avoided making eye contact with each other, while others fidgeted with their silverware. Sophia stood in the middle of it all, still clutching the note, her emotions a whirlwind of gratitude, disbelief, and pride. The manager approached her hesitantly, his usually confident demeanor now awkward and subdued. You handled yourself well tonight, he said, his voice quieter than usual. Sophia glanced up, her expression unreadable. Thank you, she replied, her tone polite but distant. She knew the manager had been one of the first to doubt Elon's presence, and now the shift in his attitude felt too little, too late. Across the room, a family who had openly stared at Elon earlier leaned in to whisper amongst themselves. The father sighed heavily, his face betraying a mixture of guilt and regret. We shouldn't have judged him like that, he admitted to his teenage son, who nodded silently. At another table, a woman dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, her voice breaking as she spoke to her partner. What if we've treated other people the same way? People we didn't even notice? Sophia quietly resumed her work, clearing dishes and resetting tables, but the weight of what had happened lingered. Every interaction she had with a customer that night felt charged with an unspoken apology, a shared understanding that they had all learned a lesson they hadn't anticipated. As the evening wound down, Sophia slipped into the kitchen for a moment to catch her breath. She unfolded the note Elon had written, reading it again carefully. Beneath his message of gratitude, he had added a final line. Kindness is the currency that never loses its value. Keep spending it. Her heart swelled as she tucked the note into her apron pocket, the words a reminder of what truly mattered. When the last table was cleared and the staff began cleaning up for the night, the atmosphere in the restaurant felt different, lighter yet introspective. The usual chatter and laughter had been replaced by quiet reflection. The staff gathered briefly at the end of their shift, as they always did. The manager, uncharacteristically reserved, addressed the team. Tonight was unusual, he began, choosing his words carefully. And I think we all have something to think about after what happened. Let's make sure this place represents what we say we stand for. Sophia caught a few glances from her coworkers, some offering small smiles of respect. She didn't need their approval, but it felt good to know that her actions hadn't gone unnoticed. As she left the restaurant that night, the envelope tucked securely in her bag, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The money would change her life, yes, but the lesson she had witnessed would change how she approached the world forever. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual energy, but to Sophia, everything felt sharper, more vivid. Elon Musk's experiment had left a mark on her, on the restaurant, and on everyone who had witnessed it. In the end, it wasn't just about the money or the fame. It was about the profound impact one small act of kindness could have, even in the most unexpected of places. Days after the event, news of Elon Musk's undercover experiment spread like wildfire. Social media platforms buzzed with discussions, the story reaching millions of people across the globe. Headlines ranged from Elon Musk tests humanity at upscale restaurant to billionaire rewards kindness in unforgettable experiment. The copper elm quickly became the center of attention, though not all of it was flattering. Stories of the staff and diners' initial reactions drew both criticism and introspection from readers. Comment sections filled with debates about empathy, societal judgment, and how appearances shape perceptions. Sophia's life, meanwhile, transformed overnight. Reporters sought her out for interviews, eager to hear her perspective on the event. She was hesitant at first, overwhelmed by the sudden spotlight. But when she finally spoke, her words were simple, yet powerful. It wasn't about knowing who he was, she told one journalist. It was about treating someone with dignity, no matter their circumstances. That's something we should all do, not just for billionaires in disguise, but for everyone. The $50,000 check allowed Sophia to enroll in culinary school,